for the to everyone. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let's meditate just briefly, just a minute or two. Om. Om. Well, once again, we want to greet you, especially those of you who are just arriving now. Tonight, okay.
It's perfectly fine for you both to just feel free to launch in if that's, but
No.
we just wanted to, again, for those who've just arrived, to welcome them, to welcome you. We're facing some slight technical issues, which is not allowing us to shift over to the Facebook Live, but we have our best minds on it. So hopefully that'll happen soon. In the meantime, as always, it's a joy, it's a pleasure. The topic especially, thank you for suggesting it, how to stay positive under all circumstances, a very, very much needed for all of us at all times. So we'd like, of course, for those of you who do not know our great, great honored guest today, this is Nayaswami Jyotish and Devi ji. They are the spiritual directors of our worldwide work, and the successors of Swami Kriyananda, closest of friends to everybody, and our guides until we too achieve the same freedom that our gurus did. So lovely to have you again.
Oh, it's just wonderful to be with
It
you.
looks like it's come out on Facebook, so
Yes.
Our prayers have worked. So would you like to just say a few words about, perhaps since you suggested this topic, was there a reason that this thought was coming to you?
Yes, in fact, you know, I don't know if it's been your experience recently, but we have talked with a lot of people in the relatively recent past, you know, within a month or two, people who are going through very difficult times and are feeling under a lot of stress and sometimes with anxiety, many different reasons. Sometimes it's health, sometimes it's economics. It can be many, many different reasons. But the reality is that people are experiencing somewhat of a difficult period. And I think that started with the pandemic, and that threw everything off to a certain extent. And now people are trying to regain their equilibrium. And so we thought it would be a good topic for us to discuss. And these evenings, in conversation evenings, are just that. We're going to be having a conversation ostensibly with Joe and Mariani, but actually with all of us. And so please feel free to type in questions into the chat box or however you want to do it. But coming back to the topic now, how to stay positive in all circumstances. This is more difficult to do as we get under pressure, under stress, keeping positive. But one thing that's helpful to understand is that we have so many tools at our disposal with Yoganandaji's path, with this great path of meditation. Meditation itself is one of the best, perhaps the best tool. But we have many, many other tools that will help us to stay positive. Now, staying positive can't really be done just with the mind, just by telling yourself, oh, I shouldn't be upset. It goes deeper than that. So the science of yoga, especially our path and the way that it's taught, helps us take control over our flow of energy. For those of you who I assume is most everyone watching, for those of you who are on our path, we have 4 basic techniques of meditation, or not even of meditation, 4 basic techniques that we work with, and all of them help us to control and focus our energy. So we have energization exercises and the Hong Saw and Om technique, and then most of all, Kriya Yoga. And so those techniques are, one might say, built around the axis of controlling our energy. And how to remain positive all the time is not just something of the mind. See, the mind follows the flow of energy. If we can get our energy flowing in a positive way, then the mind will automatically begin to create rationale for why we should be positive. And if the energy is flowing in a negative or downward direction, contracting so that we become more self-involved, then we're going to become negative, and we're going to find all sorts of reasons why only an idiot would try to be positive at this time. And so it's really dependent on our flow of energy, not so much on the thoughts, because the thoughts follow the flow of energy. And so if we can begin to pick it up from that string, and that's what we'll be talking about as we have this more of a time of dialogue. But I just wanted to set the stage by saying that what we want to talk about tonight is not just kind of a shallow, oh, Pollyanna, oh, everything is wonderful, even if we're not feeling that. We want to get down deeper, because if we're not feeling positive, there's no sense in denying that we're not feeling positive, but there's no sense in staying negative either. And so if we have the tools to turn that around, then let's use those tools. And so I think that's what we'll be diving deeper into tonight.
yes. Good evening, everyone. Excuse me. I'll add a few thoughts here as well. You know, there's a marvelous statement in Autobiography of a Yogi. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water. In which Master says, thoughts are universally, not individually rooted. And he goes on to explain that there are different currents of consciousness. It's more like tuning a radio to a certain frequency. And so if you turn the radio of your thoughts, your reception station, receiving station, to downward negative energy, then everything you look at is like that. If you turn your consciousness, tune it in to elevating energy, then everything you see reflects that. So it isn't a matter of, well, this bad thing happened, but I'm going to be positive about it. It's living from your own center and aligning your consciousness with upward moving energy, as Jyotish was saying, through techniques, through affirmation, through attunement with the guru. We'll talk about these things more, but this enables you to approach life with an upward solution-oriented perspective, because when we meditate, Master teaches us, we concentrate at the spiritual eye, the Kutastha Chaitanya, and this is also, as our guru explains, the seat of super consciousness. Now, super consciousness has many, many aspects to it. It is solution-oriented. It is filled with joy. It is the seat of willpower, all of these things. And so it's sort of a reinforcing cycle. And I'll end with this thought, and then we'll have questions and hopefully some answers as well. But if we attune ourselves with upward rising energy within ourselves, then we naturally, by holding the mind here, we naturally have positive solution-oriented thinking. Then, if in the world throughout the day, our daily interaction, if we make an effort to be solution-oriented and positive, then when we return to meditation, we haven't lost that focus. But if in the day you're discouraged and angry and negative, and you try to meditate, it's an uphill battle. So positive thinking is reinforced by meditation, and meditation reinforces our positive thinking. So it's really quite a beautiful process. So it really makes all the difference in life, because there's not one of us who are gathered together this morning, or anybody in the world who doesn't have difficult situations that they're going to have to deal with this day. But it just depends on our level of consciousness. And then it makes all the difference, whether we feel that we are in charge of our life, whether we're living from inside out, or whether we're a victim of circumstances. We have a choice. Okay, so Shurjo and Narayani, that's kind of an overview from each of us. So
Lovely.
would you like to ask us some questions?
You've obviously touched on aspects of this, but I thought it might be helpful, if you think so as well, just to back up and say, what are the consequences of positive thinking and negative thinking? Why in the first place should we make the effort? Because other than the fact that, yes, I'm feeling crummy when I'm negative and I feel a little better when I'm positive, what's the overarching need to ensure that we don't keep slipping into a negative consciousness?
That's a good and very important question. Let's first look at this in terms of brain physiology, the neuroscience of the brain. Master, I assume everybody knows when we say master, we're referring to Paramahansa Yoganandaji. Master said that every thought is thought is real, that it is an energy, just as electricity is an energy. And so he said that every thought creates a little bit of a groove in the brain, and repetitive thoughts create deeper and deeper grooves in the brain. Modern neuroscience would say that these are a neurocircuitry or neural pathways in the brain. So think of it, think of the mind as being very kind of plastic. Really, the brain has the consistency of tapioca pudding, one might say. It isn't solid, it's very fluid. And so think of every time energy goes through a neural pathway, it leaves a little track. Well, of all the thoughts we have during the day, we leave all of those little tracks. Now, some of them, if they're positive, along with that positive track, there are also positive neurochemicals that are released that make us feel better. There are 4 or 5 major ones. I won't go into it because it's a little technical, but there are major neurochemicals that make us feel positive or allow us to feel positive. And when we have negative thoughts, or we have fear, or we have anger, it releases, let's call them poisons, negative neurochemicals into the brain. So every thought, we create a little track in the brain, and we also release positive or negative neurochemicals in the brain. And so what we want to do is we want to control our thoughts to the extent that we can, so that we create a healthy, one might call it healthy neurophysiology inside of ourselves. So that, and that, of course, it cascades down the body. You release hormones, positive and negative, and so physically you feel good, or you feel bad, or you feel jerky, or you feel angry, tense. All of those things follow, along with the neurochemistry. Even more importantly, I might say, is that repetitive thinking produces repetitive thinking in the same direction. And so the more we are upset or angry, especially if it's repetitive, that we make a very easy pathway for that thought to repeat itself. And so the more that we can begin to control our thinking, and we can control our thinking. Yogananda gave us many techniques, but by controlling our thinking in a positive direction, we create neural pathways that allow us to be positive. And the more we do that, the more we can unleash those and be positive under all circumstances.
Another aspect too is the principle that Yoganandaji talked a lot about, and that's magnetism. So if you have a positive outlook, if you meet life halfway, if you say yes to life, as Swamiji used that expression, Swami Kriyananda, then you create a positive magnetism and you draw the opportunities to you. And we've seen this countless times in watching Swami Kriyananda operate in the world, where because of his positive energy, he just drew the right people, the right opportunities in his life. And he had many opportunities to be discouraged and to be negative by when Ananda Village burned to the ground. But he had so trained his consciousness to be uplifted that there was a flow of positive energy, which the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy, greater the flow of energy, the greater the magnetism. And this works positively or negatively. If you have very strong negative magnetism, nothing's going to work. Oh, I have the worst luck and no one's going to care about me. You will manifest that. You will draw that to you exactly. But if you are thinking, I think I can do this. It's hard. I mean, this was Swami's attitude. I'm going to create a community out of nothing, with very little money, with a handful of people to help me, but we're going to do this. And in that positive flow of it, and it wasn't with pride, it wasn't with hubris, it was just with the sense, it was with an upward flow of energy. And that magnetically drew amazing opportunities. And I remember once we were in a bookstore with Swami Kriyananda, and he found a book that he liked. It was on display. I don't even remember what the book was, but he said it was a small shop. And he said to the owner, "Oh, I'd like to buy this book." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. That's our only copy. It's display. We're out of them." And Swami looked at the book and he got out his phone and he said, "Well, I'm just going to call the publisher and have him mail me the book." And the bookstore owner said, "My sir, you're very direct." And Swami said, "I don't know how else to be." He just was so solution oriented that whenever a block came, he found a solution. And so being positive is not, it's planting seeds for the future, for your success in the future, for opportunities, for good health, for so many things that we strive for in life. But we need to understand that it's because of the positive flow of magnetism we put out that these things come to us.
Is there anything, particularly, for example, an instance in your own life where you turned your thought process around? And how did you do that? And most importantly, what were the results of that action?
Well, there were times that were both personal and for the whole of Ananda. Perhaps the most dramatic one of all was about 6 years into the creation of Ananda Village. We had about 40 homes at that time, or 25 homes at that time, and a population maybe of 100 people. Then 6 years into the community, there was a forest fire that burnt down every one of the homes virtually. And we had a baby that was 11 days old at the time, and our home was completely destroyed. So if you want to talk about adverse circumstances, those are just about as adverse as you can imagine. And yet, for us, we immediately turned our energy not to bemoaning what had happened, but to figuring out how to move ahead. How can we rebuild these homes? How can we get the resources that we want? How can we get through the next couple of weeks without clothing? And all of that focus of our consciousness was towards solutions. And Swami Kriyananda, in fact, came to Devi. He had been away, and he came a couple of days after the fire and came to us. And of course, he knew our circumstances. And he looked at Devi and he said, "How are you?" "Well, that's good." He didn't allow her to answer. He didn't allow her to say anything negative, because he wanted that positive flow of energy, and the thoughts followed the energy. So we really didn't go through that being sad. But to answer your question, what did we do? We put out energy in a solution-oriented manner.
I'll share with you something much less dramatic, but it was a lot of fun. It happened to me 2 weeks ago. We're kind of busy right now because we're getting ready to leave in less than 2 weeks to go to visit Ananda's community in Italy, and then we'll go on to India. So we don't have a lot of spare time trying to get everything done. But a friend of ours invited Jyotish and I over to visit her and her husband and have tea. And we're sort of, well, we don't really have time, but of course they're our friends, we'll go do it. So we get to the house and we find out, oh, the woman who invited us, she's not feeling very well, and it doesn't really work for her to have tea with you. And we said, okay, that's fine, we understand. And so we went back home, and I was kind of
Miffed.
that's a nice word. I was kind of miffed. And I said, why couldn't she at least call us? You know, we wouldn't have even made the trip there. And that was rude of her, et cetera, et cetera. And then I just, about an hour went by and I thought, you know what? I don't feel good with that energy. She's my friend and I'm judging her and I'm angry. And I said to Jyotish, I'm turning this around. And I got on the phone and I called her and I just got a message, her message machine. And I said, I'm so sorry you're not feeling well. We were, you know, let's try to maybe after we get back, make sure we get together and I hope you feel better. And then she called me back a little later. We had the best talk I've ever had with that person. It was like this very sweet connection was formed of deep love and friendship. So I felt that anger, I felt that frustration, and I also felt, I don't like feeling this way. This person's my friend. And I just said, I'm turning this around. And I did. And it turned out to be, Jyotish was sitting there when I talked with her on the phone. I said, that was the best talk I've ever had with her. So anyway, that was a little instance, but that's something very applicable when you get miffed at daily life, people offend you in little ways. Don't dwell on it. Turn the energy around and put out positive energy, and the reward will surprise you.
Beautiful.
I
Really
really
beautiful.
like that word, miffed. It's a perfect word. So I'm not yet that far caught in it, so I'm just miffed about it. But what struck me from both of your responses was that in a certain way, positive thinking is a little misleading, because both of you talked more about the immediate action that you put into place, because we kind of just stop and we're like, oh, we're doing affirmations and we're doing so many things, thinking, oh, let me just shift all this this negative pull. But not everybody immediately thinks that what is the first kind of immediate action I need to take. And I think that's already the first clue to how do we stay positive under all circumstances. Is we've got to actually do something about it, because the mind's not often strong enough to hold a positive thought. Even if I try to force and introduce a positive thought, it doesn't take root, and it very quickly starts to shift back into the old thought patterns. So thank you for that. Jyotish, you mentioned, of course, such a very extreme example. I don't know how many of us would, after our houses have burned down, after all our clothing and all our possessions are lost, after our child has just been, born 11 days, and we cannot provide for our own child in even the most basic ways. I highly doubt many of us would immediately think of what's the solution, what can I do, and how can I help others. Of course, you had some training with Swamiji. You said 6 years in, you've probably built enough of that energy. But what would be how can I say to somebody who's just gone through a great loss, or a big betrayal, or just something major in their life, a death perhaps? What are the kind of smaller steps perhaps that we can just help move towards? Is there a sequence that you might think that could help in such a process, a sequence of events, a sequence of actions, a sequence of thought patterns?
Yes, that's a very good question, Sergio. And it's a nice way to put it. Yeah, there's very much a definite sequence that should be followed. Swamiji, in his book, Education for Life, talks about our specific gravity. That's how light our consciousness is or how heavy it is. And we have an overall specific gravity. So you've all met people who are constantly kind of negative and sour and complaining, and nothing seems to cheer them up and nothing seems to satisfy them. Why are they that way? Because they practiced being that way. They got really good at it. They probably spent several lifetimes practicing becoming like that. And they're spending this lifetime practicing how to be negative. And so I hope none of us watching are among that group. But if we are having the tendency to be negative, then what is the sequence, or when something difficult or traumatic happens, what is the sequence that we should follow? Well, how do you raise specific gravity? How do you raise energy? The first thing is that you have to get a flow of energy going. The difficulty with negativity is that it saps your will, and you don't want to try to do anything. You don't want, even if somebody suggests a positive thought, if your energy is too downward pulling, you won't accept it, and you'll probably get angry at them and feel that they're being unrealistic. So forget thinking. Thinking is not your friend when there's a negative flow of energy going. Action is your friend. You've got to get a flow of energy. So if you're working with somebody, as Sergio, what can we say to somebody who's going through this? Probably don't say much of anything. If you want to say anything, say something like, let's go out for a walk, or let's listen to some good music, or just anything to get their mind off thinking about themselves and get a flow of energy. Once there's a flow of energy, like a boat in the ocean can't be steered until it is moving in the water. And so you have to get it moving in the water. Do anything that you can. That's why we turned to action right away, because we had long understood these principles, that if your action, if your energy is flowing, then you create the positive magnetism that Devi was talking about, and solutions will come. But for somebody whose energy is completely stuck, the first thing is just to get it moving. And if you then can get it moving even a little bit, then the next step is to get them outside of themselves. So not doing something just for themselves or thinking about themselves. So the next step after the movement of energy is to get them to do something even a little altruistic, a little something to help somebody else. And we had a wonderful example of this. There was a friend of ours, he's a member of the Gorgon Center, and a very fine man. He had a son, a teenager, who had cancer, and his son passed away from this cancer. This was about 1.5 or 2 years ago. And within 2 weeks, his father died from COVID. And that kind of a event, double event, would paralyze most people. But he didn't want to dwell in that. He called our center leader there, Diana, and he said, isn't there something that I can do? Something, I don't want to just sit here and think. And she suggested, because at that time the pandemic was just starting, she suggested that we have a hotline, a 24-hour hotline that people can call if they're having their relatives ill with COVID. Would you like to be working with that? And he did. And so for the next several months, he served in that way, even though he himself was going through a difficult time. See how you get the energy moving, then you get it turned toward helping others. And finally, then you can suggest higher things like meditation and other techniques.
Another helpful suggestion you can give to people, and since we were speaking of the fire that burned, the forest fire at Ananda in 1976. And as you've heard, we lost everything we had. For a few days afterwards, I was really kind of in a state of shock, just kind of disoriented. And then I thought, I've got a young child to care for. I've got a community that's in need. I have to get my trip together here. So I felt a sense of responsibility to others. And I knew I had to get my energy moving in a positive way. And I thought, well, how do I move forward here? And so what I did, and I don't know if this applies to others, but I thought about our home that had been lost. I thought about everything. It took me several hours. It was like a meditation. I thought about every piece of furniture, every dish, every house plant, every quilt, everything we had. I thought about it, and then I let it go. And somehow and I gave it to God, actually. I just said, okay, God, we had it for a little while, now you have it. Okay, we have it. And I just gave everything to God. And at the end of several hours, I felt fine. I knew I could move forward. So essentially, when someone's gone through a trauma, a crisis, what Jyotish said, find action, find a way to help them be motivated to help others, but then also very clearly to look at the situation, accept it, and then release it. And then get on with whatever solutions and new directions you want to accomplish with your life. But it's so important, and we've said this earlier, but we want you all to understand, being positive is not a matter of having a big smile on your face and laughing and telling jokes. That's not it at all. Being positive under all of life's circumstances is to be able to be centered in yourself, to feel love and devotion to God, that that no matter what happens, He's with you, and to then live your life with faith and trust. And so it's really, positive thinking is one of the most important spiritual practices we can find. And I know people can ask a million questions. Well, what if you get fired at work? What if you, lose your income? What if your apartment is destroyed? All of these things. It's the same answer to all of them. Lift your consciousness, find solutions, and trust in God. And then after a while, you don't need to be tested anymore.
Oh, wonderful.
So beautiful, yes. I'm going to read this question just to make sure that is well understood. It's a little bit subtle, and I thought this would be good to discuss a little bit more on. However, after you both answer this question, I would like for all of you who are listening, please, if you have any question, anything that you would like more clarity on, please type it on the chat. And Jyotish and Devi would be delighted to address that more personally to you. So this question is, when it comes to positive thinking, where does one draw the line between living a fantasy versus being realistic? And can positive thinking be used to escape facing reality as it is?
Yes, it's a good question and a subtle one, because first of all, we don't want to be in denial about events. That doesn't help anything, nor do we want to be in denial about our own state of consciousness, but we also don't want to be locked in to our present way of thinking. So most of the pain, let me say 95% of the pain that we're feeling about any situation is not the pain of the situation itself. It is the pain of our negative reaction or our attachment to that situation. So is it fantasy? to say I can control my reaction? Is it fantasy to say I can control my thinking about something? It's fantasy to say, oh, it didn't happen. It's, that isn't true. But the real problem that we face, the real angst that we have is not in the situation, it's in our reaction to the situation. Yogananda Ji said that all situations are neutral. It's our reaction to them that make them either positive or negative. And so the difference between fantasy is just kind of to dreamily say, oh, I wish it would go away, or oh, everything is fine. That doesn't have any energy to it. But it is not fantasy to say, I don't like the way that I'm feeling. I'm in control of my own feelings. Let me do something about it. And that addresses the problem at the level that it is, which is our own reaction and our own attachment to having things in this way. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy, because we are attached to things and we do want things to be our way. And sometimes, as Devi was saying, even the things that aren't pleasant, we have to finally get to the point where we say, well, I'm not in control here. God, you're in control. I give this problem to you, and I have faith that you will help, but I will do my part in trying to be as solution-oriented as I can.
I'll just share more on a personal level, not only my own experience, but watching other people. The spiritual life is really for people of great strength and courage. And if you don't have it, but if you're sincere, believe me, you will develop it along the way, because God will test you. He'll say, okay, you're doing pretty well. Now I'm going to give you this situation. Okay, you handled that pretty well. Now I'm going to give you this situation, until finally there's nothing that can happen that is going to throw your peace of mind. Master told the story in one of his recorded talks. And, he had this wonderful Bengali accent when he spoke in English, but it was the story of Saint Anthony, who was a great Christian saint. Yogananda told this story. And he was one of the early Christian fathers, and he lived in the desert in Egypt. And he was always, Christ was his Ishta Devata, was the form he worshiped. But the forces of darkness were testing him, and he would be living in these caves in the desert, and the force of darkness would come and try to overwhelm him, but Anthony would just stay firm in his faith. And then finally, it was the last great showdown, sort of like in the Mahabharata, the last great battle between Duryodhana and Bhima. And the dark forces of Satan were kind of overwhelming him. And Anthony was in this cave, and it was crushing down on him. And he heard Satan's voice said, denounce God and worship me. And Anthony was sore afraid, as Master said, but he said, never, I will only give my love and my allegiance to God. And just in that moment, all of this test faded, and Christ was standing there before him. And Anthony said, Lord, where have you been? And the way Master tells the story on this recorded talk, he said, Anthony, I was just the same with you, meaning I was always there. And so that's what we need to remember. No, it's not going to be easy. The spiritual life is not easy, but it's the best game in town, because it helps us become who we really want to be and to find our own true potential. So we need to say, yes, this is not easy, but yes, I can do this. And I'm strong enough to face whatever comes my way. And what a great opportunity. What a great opportunity. And I don't know a single person who's been on the path, and we've known people for more than 50 years, devotees. I don't know a single one who hasn't been tested to the core of their being, but they came out victorious. And now at this point in so many of their lives, I can see nothing's going to touch them anymore.
But I would add that life is not easy. And the spiritual path, yes, tests come, but the spiritual path gives us at least tools to deal with them. There's a statement among people who are battling alcoholism that there's no problem that alcohol can't make worse. And so I'd turn that around. There's no problem in life that comes that the spiritual path can't help you get through it.
That was just very powerful, very, very powerful. Thank you. It really just feels like positive thinking we should really shift it around, because I'm enjoying shifting positive thinking to solution-oriented thinking, because that somehow there's so much dynamism in it, and there's energy, as opposed to it's almost like I'm deluding myself and denying what is by playing around with my mind. But in this way, I'm actually moving a lot more energy. And so
there's a wonderful story, and Narayani was there from the life at the end of Swami Kriyananda's life. He had so many health challenges, and at one point when he was in Pune and Narayani was there and his nurse Miriam, he had kidney failure, and they had to take him into the hospital and put him on dialysis. And we didn't know if he was going to survive. And Jyotish and I called up his nurse, and we said, we were in America, and we said, how are things going? And she said, well, I'm in Swami's room. Do you want to talk with him? And we said, yes, we would love to talk with him.
In his hospital room.
In his hospital room, yeah. And so he got on the phone, and we didn't know, he was feeling, he'd come close to death. And he said, well, I've got so many tubes coming out of me that people tell me I look like a plate of spaghetti. And we just all laughed. And that's how he responded in that situation. And, such a marvelous example. And he wasn't faking it. He wasn't, Pollyanna or anything like that, or fantasy. He just could find the underlying joy in everything. And in fact, one time he said, joy, speaking of solution-oriented, he said, joy is the solution, not the reward. Meaning to have positive thinking, that's the solution to all of life's problems. It's not that joy is what you achieve when everything goes well. It's to use the kind of the gauge of joy to try to rise to that level no matter what happens. That's the solution to whatever tests face you.
Lovely. Anybody in the room who has a question, or Rajesh, can you look on Facebook as well? And of course, anybody on this Zoom call with us, please do type it in. This has been such a wonderful conversation thus far. Oh, do you have?
I was just gonna,
We have Aryavan here with us.
With one.
Oh, hi,
good.
Aryavan.
Aryavan, hi.
I was just thinking, so what you were saying about positive, thinking, and maybe that's not the right term. What is the role of acceptance in positive thinking and finding solutions? When are we supposed to put out hard energy to make sure something happens? And how do we know when something is actually trying to happen and we're just supposed to accept?
Was that clear?
Yeah, repeat it, because we heard it, but I'm not sure the rest of the.
He's talking about the role of acceptance in positive thinking, in terms of when, I guess this is the eternal struggle. When do we know that energies needs to be put out? Or when do we know that what's happening to us is, just there's an acceptance to it, and that there's something trying to happen that we don't in this moment need to necessarily adjust, change, or, otherwise tamper with?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There are two ways that acceptance can be looked at. The first is to accept things as they are and not to try to push them away or reject them. Swami Kriyananda used the example that if you're playing tennis and your opponent hits a very hard, difficult shot toward you, it doesn't help you to say, oh, I wish he hadn't done that. Oh, I don't like it when he does. You have to accept that that's what's happened. And so whatever comes at you, don't deny it, accept that this is what's happening. Now, the next step, like the tennis player, is to do whatever you can to act correctly in that situation. And in this case, in tennis, to hit the ball back to your opponent, but in life, to adjust to whatever the situation is. Now, you don't have to go the next level and have acceptance be, oh, everything is wonderful. I just love it when life hits me those difficult shots. That is false thinking. But accept that this is what's happening, and then accept that you have the power to do something, to react properly, not emotionally. I mean, to take action, positive steps, solution-oriented energy to overcome what has come to you. Later on, then there can come a time when you're more detached from the situation. And at that time, especially in meditation, then you can say, basically, I accept everything from you, God, is coming with your love. In the moment, it's hard to do that. But later when you're detached, then it's very important to say, God, I really understand that everything that comes to me comes from you with love in order to free me. And then you can go to a deeper level of acceptance.
And I also think there was another aspect to that question about when to stop, when to stop trying to be solution oriented. And that's a very interesting question, because again, I'm thinking so many times from the life of Swami Kriyananda, where he was trying to accomplish something and he'd go in one direction and that wouldn't work. So he'd look for a solution in another direction and that wouldn't work. But he kept trying with faith in God, and then a door would open, and maybe it wasn't the way he had expected at all, but it was that positive flow of energy helped him to tune into the solution that would work. So that's, so often we get fixed, and I do it myself, and I see so many others doing it. This is the way it has to work. God, what's wrong with you that you don't understand that? But really to just say, well, let you have the solution, God. I'm not seeing it really clearly now. I'll try this, and that didn't work. Okay, I'll try that. I'll try this. But again, it all harkens back to the flow of upward moving energy. And that's what Swami, he chose the name Kriyananda. I often think about that. Joy through Kriya, joy through action. And he did them both. He had the joy of the upward rising energy in the spine, and he had the joy of using that upward rising energy in his actions. And so to work with that flow, not with a specific goal in mind, but just say, I'm trying to accomplish this. I'm not sure the best way to do it, but you show me, and you show me how to overcome any obstacles. So it's a very, the more we learn to work hand in hand with God in finding our solutions in life, in remaining positive, the more we tune in to what's trying to happen, what we need to experience to find liberation, and the more we are able to feel God's guiding presence moment by moment.
There are a couple of questions that have come in the chat box, and we'll take them and answer them very quickly. How do you understand this? They say if you are feeling bad, go to the center of this and then you'll be out of it. I mean,
Yeah,
so,
that's the question.
yeah, how do you work with that? Well, you know, in a hurricane or a cyclone, there is something called the eye of the cyclone, the eye of the hurricane, and the winds may be whirling and whirling around it. And if you stay in those winds, they will tear you up. But if you get into the center, there's a place of calmness there. In your own center, there is always a place of calmness. And if you can be unattached, meaning pull out of those winds that are swirling around, winds of emotion and reaction, pull out of them and get into your own center, then you can find that you will feel calm and you will feel solutions. Ultimately, if you can pull back enough, you can do what the masters, you can actually perceive what the masters say, that this is all a dream. None of this is really happening to my soul. It's just a dream that my ego is going through. And if you can get into that center, then nothing can get you at that point.
Yeah, it's a similar process that we shared when I spoke about looking at everything we had lost and releasing it. What I was really doing was getting centered in myself. And from that point of centeredness, then you go forward and you can face life. But it's really so important not to take life too personally. Like, why is this happening to me? You know, poor me. You know, it doesn't lead to any solutions. But if you just can step back and say, this is happening, what can I do about it? Let me respond from a point of centeredness within myself. You know, there's that great story from Autobiography of a Yogi, where when young Mukunda master, as the little boy, is running away to the Himalayas with his friends, and his brother Ananda tracks him down, and he's put in, they're being held in a jail till his brother can come and get him. And the brother said, oh, if you want, I mean, not the brother, the policeman said, if you want to hear about a great saint, none would be greater than this sadhu that I met the other day. There was apparently a murderer who was plaguing this area. And we were patrolling the area, and we saw a man walking up ahead that looked like him from the back. And we said, halt, but he kept going. So I took my axe and I struck him on the shoulder, and it severed his arm. And this sadhu turns around and says, I'm not the murderer you're looking for. And he pushes the stump back in, and it heals. And so, you know, how would most people react? Why are you attacking me? That hurt. He just was so calm and centered and dealt with it. And that's what the example that all the great ones give us.
Also, I just have to add, call on God, call on Master to help you through your difficulties. Their power is greater than ours, and greater than positive thinking, and greater even than solution consciousness. They're the ultimate consciousness. And so do connect with them and call on them. Go, you know, go to your meditation room when you're in difficulty. And if your mind is roiling, then just chant or feel devotion, but connect with God and lay all of your problems to them and ask them for help. If you reach out to them, it's said that if you reach up to God, he will reach down to you with 100 times the strength that you reach up.
And, you know, something else I would recommend to everyone, and this is something Master recommends, read and meditate his poem Samadhi and repeat it every day. It is filled, you know, vanish the veils of light and shade. That, you know, it's all about overcoming the duality of life. That's the essence. And of course, the last lines are, a tiny bubble of laughter, I am become the sea of mirth itself. God is the sea of mirth. He is the infinite positive flow of energy in the universe. And the more we tune into him, the rest of it just becomes not that important. It becomes, we see it for the dream that it is.
Thank you so much. We're a little over our time. There are still many questions coming, even both on Facebook, here in person, but I imagine that may never stop if we let it continue. So we thank you for sharing your evening. I imagine it's getting a little late for you as well there, but it was such a joy, such a pleasure, and more importantly, just so helpful, so encouraging.
And we really look forward to seeing all of you in person very soon while we're in India. We'll be doing quite a lot of traveling to many different areas. So we hope we can meet you all in person. That would mean a great deal to us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone who joined. And this is recorded and it will be shared everywhere. So those who missed will have an opportunity to listen, and those who want to study this satsang will able to do so as well. There were gems that were shared here to really meditate and start implementing right away. Thank you so much for that.
It
God
was
bless
our
you all.
joy.
Can everyone come on the screen just for a
Yeah,
moment?
just so we can see your
Yeah.
I
faces.
hope so. Whoever is
Yeah.
here also.
Yeah, turn on your camera there. That'll work. We can end Facebook.
Yes.
And then go to the next.
It's so nice to see so many of you are dear friends.
Beautiful. My goodness. Wow. Well, we could say, oh, I just do want to say, Manju, hello. I see you on the screen. And go back to Manju if you can. She was just, well, anyway, Manju, we've been praying for you and for your good health.
Okay, dear friends, God bless you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.